Hi friends, welcome to Navkar Digital Institute, India's first virtual learning platform for professional coaching. Friends, I believe we understand the importance of RTPs, MTPs and past papers. I mean, they carry a lot of weightage. Actually, they are useful from two perspectives. Number one, it gives you an idea about trend, and specifically when you refer last 5 attempts RTPs and MTPs and past papers, you understand the trend in which the questions are going to come in your exam. And more important, after preparation, when you solve RTP, MTPs and past papers, it boosts your confidence, because RTP, MTP and past papers are the ideal papers, or rather the actual papers which have been either asked in exam or has been released by ICI, that they are something, this is something which is what they are going to ask in your exams. But you know friends, where the problem is, like they have released one of the RTP in May 18. Now when May 20 students are referring those RTPs, the point is, what about the amendments? What about the changes? What about the components which has been modified? You know, in India, a lot of faculties have released lectures of RTP May 18, but they have recorded that at that time when RTP of May 18 actually was issued by ICI. Friends, that's where Navkar, the NDI, is taking an initiative. What we are doing is, respective RTPs and MTPs, we are amending as per the relevant attempt, and now we are in process of releasing the amended RTPs and MTPs. So today, when in June 20, I am recording the RTP, I am obviously recording RTP of May 20, but I am also recording RTP of May 18 as amended for June 20 attempt, or let's say as amended for November 20 attempt. So I hope you understand the importance of amended RTPs and MTPs, and for that you can rely only on one institute, and that is NDI, which is Navkar Digital Institute. Yes friends, we are the only one who is providing amended RTPs and MTPs for your attempt. So stay with us, stay home, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you and God bless you.
Yes, my dear friends, after completing the discussions on different RTPs what we had, now let's move on to discussion about our mock test papers. In short, we keep calling them as MTPs, mock test papers given by ICAI. And the fundamental idea of discussion about all these RTPs, MTPs and past exam questions is very clear that we are mastering the subject and we are ready from all the angles. In whatever manner question comes in the exam, we are ready to face it and ready to tackle it. That's the whole idea behind all this discussion, behind all this practice, behind all this revision. Clear? Come on, let's proceed. Mock test paper of October 2019. See now. Division A, multiple choice questions, 30 marks. And of course, after that, 70 marks will be straightforward theory questions or problem solving questions. But first, let's answer multiple choice questions. Come on, see that. Write the most appropriate answer to each of the following multiple choice question by choosing any one of the 4 options given. All questions in the division are compulsory, obviously. Where is the question of optional? Come on, see now first. State which of the following statement is incorrect. That means which is false. Come on. An agent supplying goods on behalf of the principal. I repeat one more time. An agent supplying goods on behalf of the principal, where invoice is issued in the name of principal, is required to get compulsorily registered. Friends, let me tell you, this is 100% false, my dear friends. I'll tell why also. Because whenever goods are supplied by principal to the agent, that is regarded as supply under section 7(1)(c) read with schedule 1, provided agent subsequently supplies goods to the customer in his own name. In his what, my dear friends? Own name. That is important. And in section 24, compulsory registration, there is one point which says that any person supplying goods or services on behalf of other taxable person as an agent or otherwise, for them only registration is compulsory. Clear, friends? Come on, see now. Next. Persons who are required to deduct TDS person required to deduct tax under which section? 51. Whether or not separately registered under this act are compulsorily required to get registered under GST without any threshold limit. This is definitely true, my dear friends. Because under section 24, there is clearly one point which says that any person liable to deduct tax at source, for him registration is mandatory. Even though he has got normal registration, separate registration he should take for the purpose of doing TDS, and generally he will use this TAN, that is tax deduction collection account number. Using that number, he will obtain registration. Next slide. Every person supplying OIDER services, that is online information and database access or retrieval services, from a place outside India to a registered person in India, is compulsorily required to get registered under GST. This is definitely false, my dear friends. It's mandatory only when they provide to an unregistered person. Logic also, I'll tell you why. Because when we talk about something called RCM, reverse charge mechanism, there is one point which clearly says that if supplier is in non-taxable territory and receiver is in taxable territory, and receiver is other than NTOR. NTOR stands for non-taxable online recipient. So if supplier is in non-taxable territory, receiver is in taxable territory, then receiver is liable to pay tax under RCM. However, one point clearly is that if receiver is a non-taxable online recipient, that is somebody who is an unregistered person or government and all, then who is liable to pay is the OIDER is liable to pay GST. That is where section 14 of IGST Act clearly talks about the concept of OIDER, which says that if OIDER is giving service to NTOR, then OIDER is liable to pay GST. If OIDER is giving service to other than NTOR, then RCM will apply. If OIDER is giving service to NTOR, then OIDER is liable to pay GST. If OIDER does not have physical presence in India, then their representative in India is liable to pay GST. And if there is no such representative, they must appoint a representative and make him liable to pay. Clear? Next. Person who supplies services, I repeat one more time, person who supplies services other than supply under section 9(5) through such e-commerce operator who is required to collect tax at source under section 52 are compulsorily required to get registration under GST without any threshold. This is also definitely false. Because when we talk about person engaged in supply of services, whether he does intrastate or interstate or through e-commerce operator, registration is mandatory only if aggregate turnover exceeds 20 lakhs. But 10 lakhs limit also will apply if there are taxable supply in special category states, that is Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland and Tripura. So in the question they asked, what of the following are incorrect, which of the following are incorrect? So first one is incorrect, third one is incorrect, fourth one is incorrect. So my answer is option C, my dear friends. I believe that we are getting clarity on this point. Good. Next. Jolly Electronics Private Limited is an authorized dealer of GG Micro Limited, located and registered in Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. It has sold the following items to Mr. Ala Rekha, a consumer. Refrigerator taxable at 18%, stabilizer for refrigerator taxable at 12%, LED television 12%, split AC 28%, stabilizer 12%. Jolly Electronics has given a single invoice indicating the price of each item separated to Mr. Ala Rekha, and Ala Rekha has given a single check for 1 lakh for all the items as a composite discounted price, and state the type of supply and the tax rate applicable on the same. So one thing you have to understand, this cannot be called as a composite supply. Moreover, this cannot be called as a mixed supply also. Because to call it as a composite supply, there should be 2 or more supplies which are naturally bundled and one of which is a principal supply. And to call it as a mixed supply, there should be 2 or more supplies which are supplied in conjunction with each other. That means they are given together like that. Here, nowhere they are given together, all are separate items. And they just gave a single invoice indicating price of each item separately. That's all. Invoice is one. When invoice is one doesn't mean that it is composite, doesn't mean that it is mixed. So, it is not a composite supply, it is not a mixed supply. What is option C? supply other than composite and mixed, and highest tax rate will apply? Obviously no. Supply other than composite and mixed and respective tax rates will apply. Common sense point. For a simple fact and reason that when we go to some shop, we might buy some different products which has got different GST rates, and the invoice could only be one. Even though invoice is only one, GST will be applicable separately for each item. No doubt about it. Then, third one. Come on, see the third question. Which of the following statement is correct? Which of the following statement is correct while issuing what, my dear friends? Tax invoice. Place of supply in case of interstate supply is not required to be mentioned. Nonsense. This is false. Because whenever we talk about interstate supply, place of supply is mandatory to be mentioned on the invoice. Next. Power of attorney holder can sign the tax invoice in case the taxpayer or his representative has been traveling abroad. This is also nonsense. Definitely a false. Because a tax invoice must be signed. A tax invoice must be signed only by the taxpayer or his authorized representative. Signature of the supplier or his authorized representative. That's it. No other person can sign that form like that. Clear? Next. Quantity is not required to be mentioned in case of goods when goods are sold on as is various basis. So what? This is also false. Because very clearly, my dear friends, in the invoice, we should give the description, quantity, value, rate of tax, amount of tax, all that we have to mention. So you cannot tell quantity is not required to mention. That is false. Finally, last point. Description of goods is not required to be given in case of mixed supply. This is also false. Because definitely you have to mention something called description, quantity, value. All those are mandatory fields what you have to mention in the invoice. So answer is definitely none of the above. Because all the above statements whatever are given are false. So everything is incorrect. Clear? Good. Next. Question number 4. Which of the following activity is taxable under GST? Which of the following activity is what, sir? Taxable under GST. First, supply of food by hospital. Supply of food by hospital to patients who are not admitted or their attendants or visitors. This is definitely taxable, my dear friends. This point came in my RTP, where I clearly told you that in case where food is supplied by the hospital to the patients, when the food is supplied to the inpatients, I repeat one more time, when the food is supplied to the inpatients, that is exempt under GST law. But when food is supplied to the patients who are not admitted or to the attendants or their visitors, then definitely it becomes taxable, my dear friends. Very, very interesting language. Makes sense, right? Speak out. Good. Then, next point. Transportation of passenger. I repeat one more time. What is the next line, my dear friends? Transportation of passenger by non-air conditioned railways. That means non-AC coach. That is always exempt, my dear friends. Because in case of transport by railways, that is exempt. However, it is taxable only in two cases. First class or AC fare. First class or AC coach, then only it is taxable. If it is non-AC coach, then it is always exempt. Then, services given by a brand ambassador by way of folk dance performance where consideration charge is 1,40,000. This is taxable. Even though, I repeat one more time, this is taxable. Even though consideration does not exceed 1.5 lakhs. So one point, let me very clearly tell you, in case of services of a performing artist by way of performance in folk or classical art forms of music or dance or theatre, under GST law, it is actually exempt, provided the consideration charge does not exceed 1,50,000. If it is more than 1,50,000, then only it is taxable. Here, if you observe, in this case, it is only 1,40,000. That means what? It does not exceed 1,50,000. But still, I told taxable because 1,50,000 limit does not apply 1,50,000 limit does not apply when the service is given as a brand ambassador. Whenever a service is given as a brand ambassador, the limit of 1.5 lakh will not apply. Next, transportation of agricultural produce by air from one place to another place in India. So this is definitely taxable because goods are going by what, my dear friends? Air. When the goods are going by air, there is no exemption at all. Next, service by way of loading, unloading, packing, storage or warehousing of rice. Special point is there for rice, my dear friends, which clearly says service by way of loading, unloading, packing, storage or warehousing of rice is purely exempt. Next point, service provided by GTA where consideration charged, I repeat one more time, where consideration charged for transportation of goods for a single carriage is 900. If it is 900, my dear friends, it is exempt, since consideration for single carriage does not exceed 1,500. So what law has done is that person wise they put the limit as 750. Single consignee the limit is 750, whereas single carriage the limit is 1,500. Here it is only 900, so it straight away becomes exempt. So they asked what are all taxable. What is taxable, my dear friends? First one is taxable, fourth one is taxable, of course third one is also taxable. So answer is 1, 3, 4. So which option is correct, my dear friends? Answer is option C, my dear friends. So fourth question answer is option C. I believe that we are clear with this point. Sir, good. Next. In which of the following supplies of goods and services made exclusively to government departments or agencies and person notified under 51 of CGST Act, TDS is required to be deducted? So they're asking in which cases TDS will come. Number 1, health department executed a contract with local supplier to supply medical grade oxygen of 2.6 lakhs including GST. So one point, let me tell you, the provisions of TDS will apply only when contract value is more than 2.5 lakhs, and contract value always means invoice value before GST. Here this is 2.6 lakhs including GST. So if I look at before GST, that value will definitely be less than 2.5 lakhs. So in this case, no TDS. Then second point, my dear friends, government school is making a payment of 3.5 lakhs to a supplier for supply of cooked food as a midday meal under a scheme sponsored by central government or what, my dear friends, state government. Sir, this is actually exempt under GST law. When it is exempt, there is no question of TDS. Why it is exempt? Because we have got one point which says that any catering services including midday meals program provided to an educational institution which is engaged in providing preschool education and higher secondary school up to higher secondary school or equivalent, that is purely exempt. So when it's exempt, there is no question of TDS. TDS provisions will apply only when the services or goods is taxable. If supply is exempt, then there is no question of TDS. TDS will apply only when the supply is taxable. Next point. Municipal Corporation of Kolkata purchased a heavy generator from supplier in Delhi. Now it is making a payment of 5 lakh rupees and IGST at the rate of 18% on 5 lakhs for such purpose. Will TDS apply? Come on, my dear friends, 100% TDS will apply since contract value is more than 2.5 lakhs. Finally, last point. Finance department is making a payment of 3 lakhs including GST to a supplier of printing and stationery. If 3 lakhs is including GST, what is the rate of GST? I'll assume that rate of GST is 18%. So if I do that working, 3 lakhs into 100 divided by 1 minute, this is coming to 2,54,000. That means the contract value is more than 2.5 lakhs. So in this case also, what, my dear friends, TDS will apply. So TDS will apply only on third point and fourth point. So answer is option D, my dear friends. Answer is option D. Getting clarity is fantastic point actually. Makes a lot of sense. Come on. Next, question number 6. Rupam wishes to file an appeal to whom, sir? Appellate tribunal. Wonderful. In which of the following cases tribunal cannot refuse to admit appeal? I repeat the word. Tribunal cannot refuse to admit appeal. Amount of tax, interest or difference in tax or difference in ITC involved exceeds 50,000. This is a perfect answer. Because when they clearly told in section 112 appeal to appellate tribunal, where they told that tribunal may refuse to admit appeal if the amount involved does not exceed 50,000. Clear my difference? So here, if it exceeds 50,000, they cannot refuse. So that's correct answer. Second, amount of fine, fee, penalty determined the order exceeds 50,000. This is also correct. Next point, exactly 50,000. They can refuse. Exact 50,000, they can refuse. Less than 50,000, they can refuse. Less than 50,000, they can refuse. When they cannot refuse is only in case where amount involved, that is a tax, ITC or fee or fine or penalty, that is more than 50,000. Because they told in the law very clearly that tribunal may refuse to admit appeal if the amount involved does not exceed 50,000. So answer is, which case they can't refuse, sir? First and second case. So straight away, my answer is option A, my dear friends. Answer is option what, my dear friends? A. Clear with this point? Good. Next. Sir, these kind of questions, how they ask, is very crazy actually. They'll cover a lot of concepts and ask this kind of multiple choice questions. See now. State which of the following statement is correct. Which of the following statement is what, sir? Correct. Services by any artist by way of performance in folk or classical art forms of music, dance or theatre as a brand ambassador, if consideration charged for performance is not more than 1.5 lakh is exempt. This is definitely false, my dear friends, because when you give service as a brand ambassador, the limit of 1.5 lakh will not apply. Even though amount is less than 1.5 lakh, still it becomes taxable. Next. Service of life insurance business under life micro insurance product as approved by IRDA having minimum amount of cover of how much, my dear friends? 2 lakhs is exempt. Let me tell you very clearly, my dear friends, when I say 2 lakhs is exempt, this is also false, because they told very clearly that service of life insurance business under life micro insurance product where maximum amount is 2 lakhs is exempt. Here they told minimum amount. So it is definitely false. Then, services by an acquiring bank to any person in relation to settlement of an amount up to 2,500 in a single transaction transacted through credit card, debit card, charge card or other payment card service is exempt. This is also false, because exemption is only when amount is up to 2,000, but here they use the word 2,500, so that definitely becomes taxable. So the statement is false. Next line. Service provided by GTA by way of transportation of goods in a carriage of goods where the gross amount charged for transportation of goods on a consignment transport in a single carriage is 2,250 is exempt. This is also false, my dear friends, because this amount is more than 1,500. So first one is also false, second one is also false, third one is also false, fourth one is also false. And the question what they asked is, which of the statement is correct? Nothing is correct. So my answer will be none of the above. Let me check that. Good. My answer is what, my dear friends? None of the above, because in all those statements, whatever they gave, nothing is correct. Clear, friends? Next line. Shahrukh BD Company Private Limited is a manufacturer of cigarettes. Cigarettes means what? Tobacco products. Exactly. It has been registered under GST in the state of West Bengal. Turnover of the company from April 18 to March 19. Turnover of the company from April 18 to March 19 is 90 lakhs. Excise duty paid on cigarettes is 10 lakhs. CGST, SGST is 18 lakhs. Crazy point. Company also recovered actual freight charges of 5 lakhs on supply of cigarettes so made during 1819 and also charge GST thereon. Company paid RCM at the rate of 5% while availing services of what? GTA, while availing services of GTA of 5 lakh rupees. Compute what turnover, my dear friends? Aggregate turnover. Now let me very clearly tell you, aggregate turnover basically covers all taxable supplies, exempt supplies, interstate supplies and exports on all India basis under same PAN, but does not include GST in that. They only told it does not include GST, but they never told it does not include excise duty. So what we'll do, my dear friends, 90 lakhs is the actual turnover. Excise duty paid is 10 lakhs and they also recovered 5 lakh rupees. GST will not consider, and whatever tax we pay under RCM is not a part of aggregate turnover, because aggregate turnover clearly defined by section 2(6) says that aggregate turnover does not include value of inward supplies. Aggregate turnover does not include value of inward supplies on which recipient is liable to pay tax under RCM. So friends, 90 lakhs plus 10 lakhs plus 5 lakhs, it comes to 1 crore 5 lakhs. That becomes my aggregate turnover. So its question answer is option D, my dear friends, because it is 1 crore 5 lakhs. Getting clarity, friends? Speak out, sir. Everyone. Good. Because they clearly told aggregate turnover covers all taxable, exempt, interstate exports on all India basis under same PAN. But it does not include GST part. But excise duty part definitely will add. Then Mr. Prabhudeva, registered under GST in Mumbai, is in the business of trading of marble handicraft items domestically and also exporting the same. His annual turnover and input tax details as follows. See now, turnover figures are given, tax paid on the figures are given. And what is that they are asking, my dear friends? Prabhudeva exported the goods under LUT. What, my dear friends? Without payment of tax. Without payment of tax. Without payment of IGST. Now Mr. Prabhudeva seeks your help in calculating the amount of refund of ITC which is eligible to claim. Clear, friends? Come on, see now. So if you observe carefully, what is that they're asking the question? Come on. Prabhudeva exported the goods under LUT without payment of IGST. Now Prabhudeva seeks your help in calculating the amount of refund of ITC which he is eligible to claim. First of all, taxable goods turnover they gave, exported goods turnover they gave, and they also gave exempted goods. Exempted goods part we'll ignore. If we ignore exempted goods part, what is the tax paid, my dear friends? Tax paid is nothing but 12,50,000 plus 5,50,000. Total comes to how much, my dear friends? 18 lakhs. And therefore, refund eligible is equal to 18 lakhs into turnover of exported goods. What is turnover of exported goods? 75 lakhs divided by total turnover. What is total turnover? 75 plus 125, which comes to 2 crores. 18 lakhs into 75 lakhs divided by 2 crores. Come on, my dear friends. $18 lakhs into 75 lakhs divided by 2 crores, right? So I can do it as 200. This comes to 6.75. 6 point what, my dear friends? 75. That becomes my answer of the refund what is eligible. So that is 6,75,000. The reason being very clear that whatever is related to exempted goods, that will completely ignore. Clear, my dear friends? Because they clearly told Prabhudeva, registered under GST in Mumbai, is in the business of trading marble handicraft items domestically as also exporting the same. His annual turnover for what, my dear friends? Taxable goods they get, exported goods they get, exempted goods they get. Whatever related to exempted, that will not touch at all. Exported only will touch. So answer is 6,75,000. Clear? Then question number 10, come on. Sira, state whether the following statements are true or false. What a brilliant question, my dear friends. What is that they're asking? They're asking whether the statements are what? True or false. Zero rated supplies means supply of any goods or services or both, which attracts what? Nil rate of tax. This is 100% false, my dear friends, because zero rated supply covers only two things. Number one, exports. Number two, supplies to SEZ. That's all. Only those are only covered in definition of zero rated supply. Second, exempt supply means export of goods or services or both, or supply of goods, services or both to a SEZ developer or SEZ unit. This is also false. This is actually supposed to be zero rated supply. Then non-taxable supply means supply of goods or services or both, which is not liable to tax under CGST but liable to tax under IGST. Nonsense. That is also false. Non-taxable supplies means those supply which are not liable to tax under GST at all. Example, alcoholic liquor for human consumption, or the 5 petroleum products which have been temporarily kept outside GST: petroleum crude, high-speed diesel, motor spirit, natural gas, and aviation turbine fuel. Next, ITC may be availed for making zero-rated supply of what goods, sir? Exempted goods. 100% answer is true, sir. Even though the goods are exempted, that means output goods are exempted, ITC can be availed for making zero-rated supply. And what is zero-rated supply? Zero-rated supply covers only exports or supplies to SEZ. So my answer is false, false, false. Last one is true. So definitely my answer is option A, without any second thought. Does this point make sense for everyone? Chalo, clear now. Raman Plastics is a manufacturer of what, my dear friends? Plastic toys. It is a registered person under GST in Shimla, Himachal Pradesh. It procures its raw materials from Punjab. During the month of April 2019, what has happened? It purchased material of 35 lakh rupees and paid IGST thereon, amounting to what, my dear friends? 6.3 lakhs. It supplied 30% of its production in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, whereas 70% of its production was supplied taxable at the rate of 0.1% to a merchant exporter. Whenever we supply to merchant exporters and all, we will just charge 0.1%. The returns for the month of April were duly filed in time. Very good. The last date up to which the taxpayer can claim refund of ITC on account of inverted duty structure. Inverted duty structure means what? Inverted duty structure is a case where the rate of duty on inputs is higher than rate of duty for outputs. If you observe, for raw material, what is the rate, what is the tax we paid, my dear friends? The tax what we paid is, what, my dear friends? 6.30 lakhs. 6.30 lakhs on 35 lakhs. 35 lakhs, 6.30 lakhs comes to 18% actually, exactly. So we paid our raw material, we paid GST at the rate of 18%. This raw material, what we have done now, 30% we supply to Jammu and Kashmir, and 70% we have given to a merchant exporter. Merchant exporter, which are taxable at the rate of 0.1%, which tax only at what rate, my dear friends? 0.1%. Now let me very clearly tell you, my dear friends, one point we have to understand is that in case of inverted duty structure, you have got a time limit of 2 years from relevant date. You always have got time limit of 2 years from relevant date. And for relevant date, my dear friends, for 2 years from relevant date, and relevant date is nothing but the end of the tax period where we will see the due date of return. For April 2019, the due date of return is 20th May 2019. From there we will calculate 2 years, which comes to 20th May 2021. 20th May, what my difference? 2021. That is the time limit within which we have to file our refund claim. Clear, guys? So what you have to understand very clearly is that in case of inverted duty structure, otherwise any refund arising on account of inverted duty structure, law clearly told that you have to make an application within 2 years from relevant date, and relevant date is very clear that due date of return for the month in which refund arises. Which month refund arise? April 2019. For that April 2019, what is the due date? 20th May 2019. From there we will calculate 2 years, which comes to 20th May 2021. This is because of 2 years from which date, my dear friends? 2 years from 20th May 2019. Very, very interesting concept, guys. Come on. 12th question. Come on, see the 12th question. Banke Bihari Pedewala is a famous sweets manufacturer. Wow, yummy. He is a famous sweets manufacturer located and registered in Mathura, Uttar Pradesh. He received an order for 200 kgs of sweets on 2nd May 2019 from Ghoom Ghoom Travels Private Limited, located and registered in the same locality of Mathura for a consideration of 1 lakh rupees. All 200 kgs of sweets were delivered to Ghoom Ghoom Travels Private Limited on 5th May 2019, but without invoice. As accountant of Mr. Banke Bihari was on leave on that day, however, invoice was raised on 6th May when the accountant joined the office after leave, and the payment is made in full on 7th May, my dear friends. Payment is made in full on which date, my dear friends? 7th May. Getting clarity, is? Now what is the question they are asking is determine time of supply of goods. Let me very clearly tell you, whenever we talk about time of supply of goods, we have got one wonderful section called section 12.2. Which section, guys? 12.2, which is a general rule, which clearly says that time of supply in case of goods is nothing but date of invoice. And date of invoice means actual date of invoice or last date when invoices ought to have been issued. Last date when invoices ought to have been issued under section 31, whichever is earlier. Let me very clearly tell you, section 31 says that whenever there is a movement of goods, invoice must be issued. Whenever there is a movement of goods, invoice must be issued. What, my dear friends? Come on, any idea? Whenever there is a movement of goods, invoice must be issued. Invoice must be issued at the time when goods are moving. Very clearly my points. So getting clarity, my dear friends. Come on, see here. If you observe very clearly, goods are delivered, otherwise sweets are delivered on which date? 5th of May. 5th of May. So otherwise, what is the interesting point they told is that in the law they clearly told time of supply is date of invoice, and date of invoice means actual date of invoice, that is in this case 6th May, or last date when invoices ought to have been issued. Whenever there is a movement of goods, invoice is supposed to be issued on or before the date when movement of goods commence. When movement of goods commenced? 5th of May. So invoice is supposed to have been issued on 5th of May, my dear friends. So straight away my answer is 5th May. Clear, my dear friends? Speak out, because law clearly told, general rule says date of invoice, and the meaning of that word date of invoice means actual date of invoice or last date when invoices ought to have been issued, whichever is earlier. And when invoices ought to have been issued under section 31 depends upon movement of goods, no movement of goods. Clear, my dear friends? Speak out. In case of movement of goods, invoice must be issued on or before a date of removal, and in where there is no movement of goods on or before a date of delivery or make available. So this is a case where there is movement of goods. So invoice must be issued on or before a date of removal, and when removal taken place 5th of May. So invoice is supposed to be issued by 5th of May, and time of supply will automatically become 5th May. Getting clarity, friends? Good. That is the story of question number 12, my dear friends. Answer is option B. Then 13th one. Affleton Spares Private Limited, located and registered in Haryana, supplies spare parts on a FOB basis to Mr. Lakshmi Khurana, an unregistered person located in Rajasthan. Mr. Lakshmi Khurana booked the courier himself with Black Dart Courier Private Limited, registered in Delhi for delivery in Rajasthan. Black Dart Courier Private Limited picked up the goods from where? Picked up the goods from Haryana, and what they have done? Deliver the courier in Rajasthan while passing to the state of UP. So goods are picked up in Haryana and they are going to be delivered in Rajasthan while passing through UP. Determine what? Place of supply of service provided by Black Dot Courier. When we talk about Black Dot Courier, we have got one wonderful section called section 12.8, which talks about place of supply in case of service of transportation of goods, which clearly says that if receiver is a registered person, place of supply will be location of such person. If receiver is unregistered person, place of supply will be the place where goods are handed over for their transportation. If you observe, who is the receiver here? Receiver is the Lakshmi Khurana, and Lakshmi Khurana is an unregistered person. So we will see the place where goods are handed over for their transportation. That means the place where movement has started. Where did the movement start? Movement started from Haryana. So place of supply becomes Haryana, my dear friends. So answer is option A. Sir, in exam, you need not write the reason how you got this answer, but you should be very clear on how you got that answer. You cannot throw some answer just like that. It is very important that you present the answer perfectly without any second thought. Clear? Next. Question number 14. See now, Sukanya, a registered supplier, failed to pay GST amounting to 5,000 for the month of January. Proper officer imposed a penalty on Sukanya for failure to pay the tax. Sukanya believes that it is what, my dear friends? Minor breach. Minor breach. And in accordance with section 126 of CGST Act, no penalty is imposable for minor breach. As I clearly told you during RTP discussion, minor breach is something where the amount involved is less than 5,000. They are asking which of the following statement is true. First, penalty is liable on Sukanya since the breach is considered as minor breach only if the amount involved is less than 5,000. This is very much true. Next, penalty is not liable on Sukanya since breach is minor breach if the amount involved is up to 5,000. No, that's not correct. Penalty is liable on Sukanya since breach is minor breach only if the amount of tax involved is nil. This is also false. Next one, none of the above, that is also false. Let me very clearly tell you, a breach is called as a minor breach only if the amount of tax involved is less than 5,000. In this case, it is exactly 5,000. So, well, penalty apply, my dear friends? Answer is yes. Next. Question number 15, my dear friends. Mr. A sole proprietor, has to appear before appellate authority. He decides to appear by an authorized representative. In fact, this concept is dealt by one wonderful section called 116, which talks about who can be authorized representative. Now see below, which of the following persons can be appointed as authorized representative of A under GST law? Number 1, Sohan, his son, who has been dismissed from government service lately. Wow. Friends, if somebody is dismissed from government service, then he cannot be appointed as authorized representative. Rohan, a company secretary who has been adjudged as insolvent. When he is only insolvent, what author representative he'll become? Next, Mukul, a practicing High Court advocate, he can always become author representative. So answer is option C, my dear friends. Answer is option C. Next. Come on, next point. See now, which of the following statement is correct? Special exemption under section 25. I repeat one more time. Special exemption under which section, sir? 25 of the Customs Act is granted by issuing a notification. Sir, this is 100%. So let me tell you what is it they are asking, my dear friends. Which of the following statement is correct? Which is correct they are asking, my dear friends. See now. Special exemption under 25 of the Customs Act is granted by issuing a notification. 100% that is false, my dear friends. Then, general exemption under 25 of Customs Act is granted by issuing an order. That is also false. That is also false, my dear friends. Then, special exemption is required to be published in Official Gazette. This is also false. Then, general exemption is not required to be published in Official Gazette. This is also false, my dear friends. General exemption, special exemption are something which are absolutely given by the Act itself. So straight away they ask in the question, what is correct? Nothing is correct. So my answer will be none of the above. My answer is what, my dear friends? None of the above, because out of all these statements, no statement is correct. Next. Countervailing duty under section 9. That means countervailing duty on subsidized articles. Countervailing duty on subsidized articles shall not be levied unless it is determined that subsidy relates to export performance. Correct? That is definitely true. Generally what happens is that whenever there is a foreigner, there is an India guy, when goods are being exported, what is happening is that the foreign country is giving some subsidy, because of which the good is coming to India at lower price. So to counter that, we are collecting something called countervailing duty on subsidized articles, also called as anti-subsidy duty. Subsidy relates to what, my dear friends? Export performance. Then subsidy relates to use of domestic goods over imported goods in what article, my dear friends? Export article. Subsidy relates to what? Use of domestic goods over imported goods in export article. That is also correct. Subsidy is conferred on all persons engaged in manufacture of export article. Not necessary that it should be given to everybody. It might be given only to certain limited persons. Clear, friends? So my answer is what, sir? First one, second one, both are correct. So my answer is option D, my dear friends. 17th one answer is option D. Then 18th one, anti-dumping duty. What duty, guys? Anti-dumping duty is calculated as what? Anti-dumping duty is always lower of dumping margin or engineering margin, whichever is lower. And I hope you know that dumping margin is equal to O. Dumping margin is equal to export price minus normal price, and injury margin. What, my dear friends? Injury margin always means fair selling price minus landed cost. Fair selling price means what value will sell in India, and landed cost means accessible value plus BCD plus SWS. We'll call it as landed cost. Clear? So answer is option what, my dear friends? B. Then 19th question. Read the following and choose which one is correct. Which one is what, my dear friends? Correct. See now. Indian customs water extends up to 12 nautical miles. That is false. Indian customs water extend up to 24 nautical miles. That is also false. That is also false. Then Indian customs water extend up to exclusive economic zone. That is 100% correct, my dear friends. And Indian customs water includes territorial waters and extends up to 200 nautical miles. Obviously, because exclusive economic zone is up to 200 nautical miles. So third one is correct, fourth one also is correct. So answer is 3 and 4. That is nothing but option B, my dear friends. Finally, last one, my dear friends, taxable event under customs is what? Obviously, taxable event under customs is nothing but import of goods into India. Import of goods into India or export of goods from India. Supply is not relevant. Sale is not relevant. Manufacture is not relevant. Only thing relevant is import and export. Then only customs duty will apply. Makes sense, right? This is the story of multiple choice questions in this mock test paper. Of course, we also have descriptive questions that also will talk. Yes? Come on. So that's the story of our multiple choice questions. Now looking at the descriptive questions, guys. And the first question is something what we sometime back discussed, what we very clearly discussed in RTP, that is the story of Power Engineering Private Limited. Remember this question, my dear friends? If you remember, I discussed this question with you, where I clearly told you that interstate movement of various modes of conveyance between distinct persons is neither regarded as supply of goods nor regarded as supply of service. Already we solved the same question in our RTP, my dear friends, where I clearly told you that on the value of the truck, we will not charge GST. Whereas GST will apply on the items in the truck and GST will apply also on the repairs. Remember this question? So there is no point of wasting your time and my time solving this question once again. So I'll leave this question for you. Then question number 2, my dear friends, come on, see that. What is question number 2? Determine whether GST is payable in each of the following independent services provided by whom, sir? Provided by registered persons. Provided by what, sir? Registered persons. See now, come on. Fees charged from office staff for in-house personality development course conducted by Markanday College, rupees 80,000. Markanday College provides education as a part of curriculum for obtaining engineering degree recognized by the law. Sir, whenever we talk about services given by an educational institution to its students, faculty and staff, that is straight away exempt, my dear friends. And education institution clearly covers any institution which is engaged in service by way of education as a part of curriculum for obtaining a qualification recognized by law. That is why this service is clearly exempt, my dear friends. No doubt about it. Then bus fees collected from students by Starboard College, 3,500 per month. Starboard College provides education as a part of curriculum, same language without any change. My answer is exempt, because service given by education institution to its students, faculty and staff, that is purely exempt, my dear friends. Does this point make sense for all of us? Speak out. Good, come on. Housekeeping services provided in Smart Kids School, a play school by Spick and Span, 25,000 per month. So when we talk about security or cleaning or housekeeping services, when they are given to an education institution, it is exempt only when the education institution is a preschool or any institution engaged up to higher secondary school or equivalent. But here this is a play school, that's why that service is exempt. Getting clarity, friends? Finally, last point, my dear friends, Global Link supplied tracing alphabets, an online educational journal to Kidsey School for 4,000. Kidsey School used the same for its students of UKG class. Friends, this point is definitely taxable, my dear friends, because law clearly told in case of online educational journals, exemption is only when that is given to an educational institution which is engaged in providing service by way of education as a part of curriculum for obtaining qualification recognized by the law. That is the reason why this is taxable. Sir, in case of security, cleaning, housekeeping, transportation of students, faculty, staff, catering service, midday meals and all, those three cases, it is exempt only when it is given to preschool, higher secondary school or equivalent. But when we talk about online educational journals, that is exempt only when it is given to an educational institution which is engaged in providing education as a part of curriculum for obtaining qualification recognized by the law. But here this is given to a school, so it definitely becomes taxable without any second thought. Clear? Done. Next, second question, B bit. Mr. X is a money changer, and what he has done, my dear friends, he has exchanged $10,000 to Indian rupees at 64 per dollar, and he wants to know the value of supply as per Rule 32(2)(b). So friends, if we try to calculate the answer as per Rule 32(2)(b), you all know that the Rule 32(2)(b) is optional, but once you opt, you cannot withdraw during the remaining part of the financial year. Middle of the year you cannot withdraw. And what is the gross currency exchange, my dear friends? Come on, how much we exchange, sir? 10,000 into 64, which comes to 6,40,000. Therefore, value of supply will be up to 1 lakh. What is the value of supply? 1% of GSE, 1% of currency exchange, minimum 250, 1 lakh to 10 lakhs, 1000 plus 0.5% of GSE minus 1 lakh, about 10 lakhs, 5,500 plus 0.1% of GSE minus 10 lakhs, maximum 60,000. Here it is 6 lakhs, 40,000. So value will be 1000 plus 0.5% of 5 lakhs 40,000. 5 lakh 40,000, 0.5% is 2,700. 2,700 plus 1,000 is 3,700. That becomes my value of supply. I hope we got clarity on this point. Clear? Good. C bit. Come on. Second question, C bit. From the following particulars, calculate total customs duty payable and integrated tax payable. See now. Date of presentation of bill of entry is 20th June. Arrival of aircraft is 30th June. And I clearly taught you the concept that whenever we talk about exchange rate, we will always see on the date of filing bill of entry. Moreover, we will always see CBSE rate but not RBI rate. Next, when we talk about rate of duty, we will see on the date of presentation of bill of entry or date of arrival, whichever is later, my dear friends. On date of what, my dear friends? On date of presentation of bill of entry or date of arrival, whichever is later. So in this two, if you observe, what is later is 30th June. What is later is 30th June. On that, what is the rate? 10%. That's all. This clarity you should have first. And the rate of IGST is 12%. And if you observe carefully, directly they gave CIF value, US dollars they have given. Air freight they have given, sir. Sir, air freight, that's important. If it is air freight, always air freight is restricted to 20% of FOB. But in the question, they did not give FOB figure. Directly they gave CIF figure. So from CIF, if I reduce insurance and freight, I'll get the answer for FOB. Freight is 500, insurance is 100. Come on. If I calculate this, my dear friends, how much it comes to? What is my CIF value, sir? What is the CIF value? $2,000. CIF value is $2,000. Come on. CIF value is $2,000. CIF value is $2,000. From that, I'll reduce freight. How much, my dear friends? $500. And I'll also reduce insurance, which is $100. When I reduce these two, what I'm getting is nothing but $1,400. This becomes my FOB. And again, I will add insurance, $100. Freight, that is nothing but 20% of FOB, which comes to $280. Total is $1,780. Sir, you need to understand very clearly that why did we reduce and why did we add again? The reason we reduce and added again because whenever goods are imported by air, actual freight is restricted to 20% of FOB. I repeat one more time, whenever goods are imported by air, actual freight is restricted to 20% of FOB. That is why we have to reduce and again we have to add like this. So figure is $1780. This becomes my CIF in dollars. So when I want to calculate CIF in Indian rupees, what is the exchange rate will apply, sir? Exchange rate will apply is 70 per dollar. 1780 into 70 per dollar. That comes to what, my dear friends? 1,24,600. 1,24,600. So my CIF in Indian rupees will become 1,24,600. On this, I will charge BCD at the rate of 10%, which comes to 12,460. Then SWS, that is social welfare surcharge, at the rate of 10% on BCD, which comes to 1,246. So 1,24,600 plus 12,460 plus 1,246. Total is 138,306. Total is how much, my dear friends? 138,306. Come on. Total figure is 138,306. On this, I will charge IGST at the rate of 12%. 12% only, right? Yes, IGST is 12%. So going back to my calculator, into 12%, this comes to 16,596.72. I'll make it as 16,597. 16,597. So my IGST figure comes to 16,597. Therefore, total duty payable is equal to BCD plus SWS plus IGST, which comes to 12,460 plus 1,246 plus 16,597. 12,460 plus 1,246 plus 16,597. It comes to 30,303. That becomes my total duty payable. How much is that figure, sir? 30,303, which becomes my total duty payable. That's it. Clear? That is the story of this beautiful question called question number 2, my dear friends. And I hope you are clear with this point. Yes? Come on. Come on, my dear friends. Now let's look at question number 3, sir. 3 of mock test paper. Come on, see that. I buy a set of modular furniture. That means what? Some goods from a retail store. Invoice is issued to me and I make the payment. Very good. Furniture to be delivered to me later in the next week when the technician is available to assemble and install it. The next day, interesting line. Come on, see that. The next day, the rate of tax applicable to modular furniture is revised upward. That means rate of tax went up and the store sends me a supplementary invoice with the delivery note accompanying the furniture to collect the differential amount of tax. Is this correct on the store's part? So let me very clearly tell you, we have got one brilliant section called section 14, which deals with time of supply in case of change in rate of tax. Clear, my dear friends? And one point very clearly, let me tell you, even though section 14 is there for time of supply in case of change in rate of tax, in case of goods, my dear friends, time of supply is always date of invoice. And when is the date of invoice? Invoice is already issued before change in rate. When invoice is already issued before change in rate, I repeat one more time, when invoice is already issued before change in rate, then old rate only will apply but not new rates. So is this correct on store's part? No. since old rate only will apply. Because law clearly told that as per section 12.2, I repeat one more time, as per which section, my dear friends? Section 12.2, time of supply is always date of invoice. And date of invoice is nothing but actual date of invoice or last day when invoice is ought to have been issued under section 31, whichever is earlier. Clear, my dear friends? And moreover, if you observe very clearly, invoice happened before change in rate, payment also happened before change in rate. So when both the things are before change in rate, there cannot be a case where new rate of tax will come. Definitely old rate of tax only will come. Clear, my dear friends? Come on, next line. The place of supply in relation to immovable property is the location of immovable property. Obviously, that is because of section 12.3, my dear friends. Suppose a road is constructed from Delhi to Mumbai covering multiple states. What will be the place of supply of construction service? What a brilliant question, guys. So let me tell you, generally place of supply in case of immovable property is always place where, otherwise place where property is located or intended to be located. But here, if the property is located or intended to be located in more than one state, then place of supply will be each of the respective state in proportion to the value determined in the contract or agreement. And if there is no contract or agreement, we'll apply something called Rule 4. Listen now, concentrate. Listen please. In general, place of supply in case of service in relation to immovable property. In general, place of supply in case of service in relation to what property, my dear friends? Immovable property is the place where property is located or intended to be located. But one special point which you have to understand now is that if property is located in more than one state, then POS would be each of the respective states. I repeat one more time, POS would be what, my dear friends? Each of the respective state. POS would be each of the respective state in proportion to value determined in contract or agreement. I repeat one more time, friends. Section 12.3 clearly says that in case of immovable property related service, place of supply will be the place where property is located or intended to be located. But one interesting point you have to understand very clearly here is that if property is located in more than one state, if property is located where, sir? In more than one state, then place of supply will be each of the respective state in proportion to the value determined in the contract or agreements. And in this context, one interesting point to be noted is that in absence of contract or agreement, then Rule 4 would apply. And Rule 4 is of IGST rules, my dear friends. Rule 4 of IGST rules. I repeat one more time. Rule 4 of what rules, sir? IGST rules will apply. That is, it clearly says you divide based on area of immovable property. I repeat one more time. We will divide based on what, sir? Area of immovable property. We'll divide based on what, my dear friends? Area of immovable property. Very, very interesting language. Clear? Done. Going back. See now. Third question, third bit. An importer imported certain inputs for manufacture of final products. A small portion of imported inputs were damaged in transit. Very sad. And could not be used in manufacture of final product. Exemption notification was in force, providing exemption in respect of specified raw materials imported into India for use in manufacture of specified goods, which was applicable to the imports made by importer in present case. Examined briefly, importer could claim the benefit of notification in respect of entire lots imported, including those that were damaged during transit. Definitely, my dear friends, answer is yes, because Supreme Court in the case of BPL is one big company, once upon a time a big brand for television. Supreme Court in the case of BPL Display Devices Limited. Supreme Court in the case of which case, sir? BPL Display Devices Limited. They clearly told that whenever an exemption is given for a particular product, it doesn't necessarily mean that exemption will apply only when the product is used. Exemption can also apply even when the product is intended to be used. Correct, my dear friends? So even for those goods which are damaged in transit, I repeat one more time, even for those goods which are damaged in what, my dear friends? Transit. Even for those goods which are damaged in transit, he can apply what, my dear friends? Exemption. Clear, sir? Because Supreme Court applied the concept of intent of the law. Clear? Friends? Come on, next point. Question number 4, my dear friends. See that. A taxable person has mistakenly paid CGST and SGST for interstate supply. Friends, we all know that there are two types of supply called intrastate supply and interstate supply. Intrastate supply is that supply where location of supplier and place of supply both are in same state. And if location of supplier and place of supply both are in different state, we call it as interstate supply. For intrastate supply, we will charge CGST and SGST. And for intrastate supply, we will charge something called IGST. Correct, my dear friends? So, when it is intrastate supply, he was supposed to pay IGST. But mistakenly, what he has paid? CGST and SGST. Subsequently, when he discovers the same, can he adjust the IGST liability against wrongly paid CGST and SGST? Answer is no, my dear friends. Because we have got one section called section 77, which says that if any tax is wrongfully collected and paid, then you can't adjust like that. Then you have to pay the correct tax without interest. Then you can claim tax wrongfully paid. That means if you pay CGST, SGST instead of IGST, or if you are paid IGST instead of CGST, SGST, then law clearly told pay the correct tax first. Pay the correct tax first without interest. No problem. Don't pay interest. Pay the correct tax first without interest and then claim refund of tax wrongfully paid. Then claim refund of what, sir? Tax wrongfully paid. Clear with this, everyone? Speak out. Good point. Come on. Aggregate turnover of, second question. Aggregate turnover of Sangri Services Limited, Delhi exceeded 20 lakhs on which date, sir? 12th August. And he applied for registration on 3rd September. That means what? Within 30 days. Generally, we know the concept that any person who is liable to be registered must apply for registration within 30 days. And this man applied on 3rd September. That means what? He applied within 30 days and was granted certificate on 6th September. You are required to advise them as to what is the effective date of registration. And it has also sought your advice regarding period for issuance of revised tax invoice. Come on, my dear friends. First of all, as per section 22, come on, any person is liable to be registered Sir, you have to observe the question very clearly. They ask the question for 6 marks, my dear friends. Come on, see the question very clearly, sir. Come on, friends, see the question very clearly and very carefully. They ask the question for 6 marks in the exam. So no games and no fun. Please understand that question is worth for about 6 marks in the exam. You can see that very clearly, my dear friends. Come on. If you see that they asked for 6 marks, so you cannot throw the answer just like that. Let me tell you the synopsis of what you are supposed to write. But of course, in exam you have to write very much in detail, my dear friends. Clear? Come on. So what is that we will write is first, as per section 22, any person is liable to be registered if any person is liable to be registered if aggregate turnover exceeds 20 lakhs, because in general the limit is always 20 lakhs. Correct, my dear friends? Moreover, as per section 25, any person liable to be registered must apply for registration within 30 days. Apply for registration within how much time, my dear friends? Within 30 days from the date they are liable. They have to apply within 30 days from the date they are liable. And an interesting point which I want to tell you is that Rule 10 talks about, Rule 10 of CGST rules talks about something called effective date of registration. Rule 10 specifies that if person liable for registration applies for registration, if he applies for registration within how many days, my dear friends? Within 30 days. Within how many days? 30 days. Then the effective date of registration, then what, my dear friends? Then the effective date of registration shall be the date on which he is liable. Come on, my dear friends, what is this interesting language we wrote, sir? Rule 10 specifies that if a person liable for registration applies for registration within 30 days, whoever is liable for registration, if he applies within 30 days, then the effective date of registration will be the date on which he is liable, my dear friends. Getting clarity? So always in exam, first paragraph represent your concept, then you represent your interpretation. At the end only, please give your conclusion. Now, in the given case, Sangria Services Limited applied for registration. Sangria Services Limited applied for registration within 30 days. Come on, my dear friends, when did they apply? They applied for registration within 30 days. Accordingly, the effective date of registration shall be the date on which they are, what, my dear friends? Liable. Shall be the date on which they are liable. That is, what, my dear friends? Come on. When are they liable? Let me go back to the question. They are liable on 12th August and they applied on 3rd September. So effective date becomes what? 12th of August. Effective date becomes 12th of August. Speak out, my dear friends. Exactly. So effective date will automatically become, that is 12th August. Moreover, section 31 deals with the concept of tax invoice. Moreover, section 31 specifies that for supplies made between 12th August to which date, my dear friends? 3rd September. For supplies made between 12th August to 3rd September. I repeat one more time. For supplies made between 12th August to 3rd September. Not just 3rd September actually. 3rd September they applied. Exactly. And they got certificate on 6th September. So for supplies made between 12th August to 6th September. For supplies made between 12th August to 6th September. Sangria Services Limited can issue something called revised invoice. They can issue what, my dear friends? Revised invoice within 1 month from 6th September. That means they can issue within 6th of October. So what is the interesting part you have to understand is that if any person who is liable to be registered, if he applies for registration within 30 days, then the effective date of registration shall be the date on which he is liable. And for supplies made between effective date of registration and the date of certificate of registration, for that period, for whatever supplies he made, he can issue something called revised invoice, and that revised invoice should be issued within 1 month from date of certificate of registration. That is 1 month from 6th September. Technically it becomes 6th October. So by 6th October he can issue something called revised invoice. Getting clarity, friends? Speak out. Very good. Come on. Going back. Point number C. Determine what, my dear friends? Customs duty payable under Customs Tariff Act, including safeguard duty. Sir, safeguard duty is a duty which is imposed in order to protect the Indian market. Whenever goods are imported in huge quantities, they are dumped into India. At that time we impose safeguard duty. Anti-dumping duty we impose only when the export price is lesser than normal price. The purpose of imposing this kind of duty is different. See now. Assessable value of sodium nitrate imported from developing country from 26th February to 25th February 2018 is 30 lakhs. And share of imports of sodium nitrate from developing country against total imports to India is 4%. Why this concept is relevant? Because in safeguard duty they gave an exemption telling that if you import articles from developing country and if the share of import does not exceed 3% of the total imports, if the share of imports does not exceed 3% of the total imports, then safeguard duty will not apply. But in this case it is 4%. So when it is 4%, no doubt about it, safeguard duty will apply. And what is safeguard duty percentage? 30%. They clearly told that in the question. Correct? Come on, next. DCD, what rate? DCD is 10%. Then IGST is what? 12%. SWS 10%. Clear, my dear friends? Come on. Speak out. So friends, what is the assessable value, sir? Assessable value is nothing but 30 lakh rupees. On this 30 lakhs, I will charge DCD at the rate of 10%, which comes to 3 lakhs. Clear, my dear friends? Apart from this, I should also charge safeguard duty at what rate, my dear friends? 30%. This 30% will always apply on assessable value only. And we are charging safeguard duty since share of sodium nitrate from developing country is more than 3% of total imports. If it would have not been more than 3%, then safeguard duty would have not come. Come on, what is that? 30% on 30 lakhs comes to 9 lakh rupees. Then we will charge something called SWS, Social Welfare Surcharge, which shall be at the rate of 10% on BCD, guys. We will not apply social welfare surcharge on safeguard duty. We'll apply only on BCD, which comes to 30,000. Total figure 42 lakhs 30,000. On this, I will charge IGST at the rate of 12%. $42 lakhs 30,000 into 12%, that comes to 5 lakhs 7,600, my dear friends. Come on. IGST figure comes to 5 lakhs 7,600. So therefore, customs duty payable is equal to BCD plus safeguard duty, correct or not, plus SWS plus IGST, which comes to how much, my dear friends? 3 plus 9, 12, 12 plus 30, 12 lakh 30,000 plus 5 lakh 7,600. 12 lakhs 30,000 plus 5 lakh 7,600. So total figure is 17 lakhs 37,600. That is my customs duty payable, 17 lakhs 37,600. So if you have to observe, my dear friends, very clearly, in RTP we had different types of questions. Again, in mock test papers we are able to find different types of questions again, which are very interesting actually. Makes sense, right? Come on, moving forward. That's the end of story for fourth question, my dear friends. Come on, sit down. Fifth question. A bit. Mr. X, an unregistered person under GST, purchases the goods supplied by Mr. Y, who is a registered person, without receiving tax invoice. So that means indirectly X is trying to help Y to escape tax, and thus helps in tax evasion by Mr. Y. What disciplinary action may be taken by the authorities to curb such type of tax evasion? And what happens is that, my dear friends, let me tell you, on X, the penalty will be up to 25,000. This is because of section 122 subsection 3. Whereas when we talk about Y, penalty will be tax evaded or 10,000, whichever is higher. And this point is given by section 122(1). So on Y, section 122(1) will come, where penalty will be tax evaded or 10,000, whichever is higher. And on X, penalty will be up to 25,000 under section 122(3). If you observe, penalty is more on the person who is helping. Of course, in Y case it is 10,000 or tax evaded, whichever is higher. Next line. Suppose in the above case, disciplinary action is taken against Mr. X and an ad hoc penalty of 20,000 is imposed by show cause notice without describing the contravention for which penalty is going to be imposed and without mentioning the provisions under which penalty is going to be imposed. Should X proceed to pay penalty or challenge? Definitely, my dear friends, X can challenge, because of provisions of section 126. Section 126 talks about general disciplines related to the penalty, which clearly says that whenever penalty is supposed to be imposed, then definitely show cause notice must be issued. And in this notice, they have to specify the facts and circumstance, and also tell what is the mistake done, and also tell what is the penalty that is going to be imposed. All that should definitely be specified in that notice. If it is not there, then definitely X can challenge, my dear friends. X can challenge. So you have to write this word called 126, general disciplines related to the penalty. Because whenever penalty is supposed to be issued, or whenever penalty is planned to be issued, then definitely show cause notice must be issued. and penalty should depend upon facts and circumstances of the case, and notice must specify what is the nature of mistake done, and notice must also specify what is the penalty that is supposed to be issued. Clear, friends? Speak out. Good. Come on. Next. B point. Come on. On 5th July, a show cause notice for 5 lakhs was issued to Janak Singhal, demanding a short payment of GST of 4,50,000 for the month of January and also interest of 50,000. Very good. Take it. Janak Singhal raised objections, and after personal hearing on 30th August, adjudicating authority passed final order for 3,50,000 without any reference with regard to payment of interest. Janak Singhal deposited 3,50,000 and informed the department on same day. Subsequently, on 15/9, department demanded interest of 60,000 on 3.5 lakhs. Janak Singhal is not ready to pay interest, and his contention is that he is not liable for interest because he deposited all the amount specified in the final order. Please write a brief note. You have to answer this based on provisions of section 75, my dear friends. 75 talks about determination of demand under section 73 or 74, which clearly says that interest is payable. Interest is payable even though it is not specified in the adjudication order. Interest is payable even though it is not specified in the adjudication order. Come on, my dear friends. So what is the line we are going to write in this, my dear friends? Interest is payable even though not specified in order. Interest is payable even though it is not specified in order. However, come on, interest cannot exceed amount specified in notice. Interest cannot exceed amount specified in notice. So friends, 2 points if you observe carefully, what I told is, number 1, interest is payable even though not specified in the order. However, interest cannot exceed amount specified in notice. Now what was specified in notice earlier? Earlier notice they told only interest is 50,000, but later on they demanded 60,000. So what interest they can charge is only 50,000. So department cannot demand interest in excess of 50,000. Interest is payable, but they can demand only 50,000, not more than that. Clear, friends? Come on, next point. See now, Mr. Sujoy, an Indian entrepreneur, went to London to explore new business opportunities on 1/4/18. His wife also joined him in London after 3 months. After 3 months, his wife also joined him. Fantastic. The following details are submitted by them with customs authorities on their return to India on 15/4/19. Basically, they are talking about something called baggage. Used personal effects, 2 music systems, jewelry brought by Sujoy 48,020 grams and his wife 96,040 grams. With reference to baggage rules, determine whether Mr. and Mrs. Sujoy will be required to pay any customs duty. Come on, my dear friends. Very, very interesting question. Come on, see now. Sir, we have got something called Rule 3 of baggage rules, which clearly says that whenever somebody is coming from any country other than Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, Nepal, Bhutan and Myanmar, and please understand very clearly, Rule 3 will apply only for an Indian resident or foreigner residing in India or a tourist of Indian origin. If he is a tourist of foreign origin, then Rule 4 will apply. I repeat one more time, Rule 3 will apply only to an Indian resident, foreigner residing in India, and a tourist of Indian origin. But if a person is a tourist of foreign origin, then rule 3 will not apply. Rule 4 will apply for him. Clear, friends? In this case, as per rule 3 of baggage rules, when he is coming from any country other than Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, what is the exemption he will get is used personal effects and travel souvenirs. Used personal effect and travel souvenirs. Come on, my dear friends. What is the exemption he'll get is basically he'll get exemption for used personal effect and also travel souvenirs. So friends, as per rule 3 of baggage rules, rule 3 will apply to an Indian resident or foreigner residing in India or a tourist of Indian origin and is coming from any country other than Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar. It is coming from Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar. We have got separate rule called rule 4 for that. Clear, my dear friends? For Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, we have got something called rule 4. And then here, what is the exemption you'll get? Use personal effect and travel souvenirs plus articles up to value of 50,000 other than those. Come on, my dear friends. Let me write the word other than those mentioned in Annexure 1. That means for Annexure 1 items, we will not get the benefit of this 50,000. And in Annexure 1, what are covered? Let me tell you that also. In Annexure 1, what are covered is basically firearms. Cartridges of firearms exceeding 50, cigarette exceeding 100 sticks, or cigars exceeding 25, or tobacco exceeding 125 grams. Alcohol, liquor or wine in excess of 2 liters. Gold or silver in any form other than ornaments. Last one, flat panel television, LCD, LED, plasma. Now, apart from this, one special point to be noted is that we have got something called Rule 5. This is a benefit of jewelry allowance. And this will apply only for those, I repeat one more time, jewelry allowance will apply only for those who stay abroad for more than 1 year. Come on, my dear friends, I repeat one more time. Rule 5 talks about something called jewelry allowance, and jewelry allowance will apply only for those who stay abroad for more than 1 year. Jewelry allowance will apply only for those who stayed abroad for more than 1 year. Clear? And this rule 5 is in addition to rule 3. That means rule 5 is an extra benefit over and above rule 3, my dear friends, and it apply only for those who stay abroad for more than 1 year. And what is the exemption they will get for jewelry allowance is for gentleman. The exemption is 20 grams subject to value cap of 50,000, and for lady they told very clearly 40 grams which is subject to value cap of 1 lakh. Little bit partiality has been done, not little bit, actually double partiality done. For gentleman 20 grams value cap 50,000, but for a lady 40 grams value cap is again 1 lakh. That means maximum is 20 grams. So provided the value is not more than 50,000. Now going back to the question, guys. For used personal effect, my dear friends, no tax. I mean to say no duty. Come on, my dear friends. For used personal effects, what will happen, my dear friends? No duty. Other side, 2 music system each worth 50,000. For this also no duty. Because we're going to straight away apply something called Rule 3. Because Rule 3 gives exemption of 50,000 to each person. Each person provided, practically we fill one form called baggage declaration form. And whenever husband and wife, both of them are coming like this, both of them should fill separate baggage declaration form. If you want separate 50,000 exemption, you should definitely fill separate baggage declaration form. If you fill one form, only 150,000 will come. And for jewelry of Sujoy, for this I will take Rule 5 benefit and tell no duty. But his wife 96,000, this is dutiable. Since she cannot avail Rule 5 benefits. Now don't get it out. Why she cannot avail Rule 5 benefits? She cannot avail Rule 5 benefit for a simple fact and reason that she stayed abroad for less than 1 year. If you observe, Sujay went on 1/4, they came back on 15/4/19. That means what? Sujay stayed for more than 1 year. But whereas wife stayed for less than 1 year, wife stayed in abroad for less than 1 year. So wife will not get the exemption of Rule 5. Whereas husband will get the exemption of Rule 5. Getting clarity, friends? So on this 96,000, duty will definitely be charged. And to give you clarity of thought, let me clearly tell you, duty will be charged on the baggage at the rate of 38.5%. 35% is the basic rate, 10% is the social welfare surcharge. Next. Briefly discussed, come on my dear friends, 6th question we are talking. See that, come on. First bit, briefly discuss the modes of recovery of tax available to proper officer. You have to write in the exam the story of section 79. What are the various modes of recovery he has got? He can adjust from refunds, he can detain and sell movable, immovable property, and he can write to collector and tell the collector to collect it as arrears of land revenue. He can write to magistrate and tell the magistrate to collect as if it is a fine. And he can enforce any bond if any given under act. So he has got various modes of recovery for recovery of the tax dues. Friends, always keep in mind 78 talks about initiation of recovery, 79 talks about recovery proceedings. Generally what they do is after they pass order, they'll give 3 months time to pay the outstanding dues. Sometimes they might grant less than 3 months also if they feel that it is prejudicial to the interest of the revenue. Clear, friends? And how will they recover, my dear friends? Adjustment from refunds, detaining and sale of movable, immovable property, and they'll write to collector and tell him to collect as arrears of land revenue, and they can write to magistrate. They means what? Proper officer can write to magistrate and tell him to collect as fine, and he can enforce any bond. And one interesting point is CGST arrears can be recovered as SGST, or SGST arrears can be recovered as CGST. This point they put in the law so that if CGST officer goes, he will collect SGST amount also and come outside. If SGST officer goes, he will collect CGST amount also and come outside. Clear, my dear friends? This point makes sense for everyone? Good. Next point. B bit, come on. In what cases assessment order passed by PO may be withdrawn? So for this point, my dear friends, you have to answer this B question applying two principles, my dear friends. The two principles of the sections are section 62 and section 64, wherein 62 talks about BJ in case of non-filers. If any person fails to file returns, then proper officer gives notice, and after he gives notice, still we do not file within 15 days, then they do something called BJA, and they will pass order, and after order is passed, within 30 days, if all pending returns are filed, if all what, my dear friends? Pending returns are filed. If all pending returns are filed and taxes paid, then order shall be withdrawn. Then what, my dear friends? Order shall be withdrawn, my dear friends. Very interesting language. Next point, 64 talks about something called summary assessment, my dear friends. What assessment? Summary assessment. Generally, this is something which is done by additional or joint commissioner. Summary assessment is something which is done by additional or joint commissioner. I repeat one more time. Summary assessment is something which is generally done by additional or joint commissioner. If they feel that delay in passing the order would be prejudicial to the interest of revenue. Then they do something called summary assessment. Then, if additional or joint finds that order is erroneous, order is what, my dear friends? Erroneous. Then they may withdraw. Then they may, what, my dear friends? Withdraw. Correct, my dear friends? But if they have to withdraw, my dear friends, one thing you have to understand is that taxable person can apply for withdrawal. Taxable person can apply for withdrawal within 30 days from receipt of order. So once summary assessment order is received, within 30 days, the taxable person can apply for what, my dear friends? Telling that kindly please withdraw the order, and if they are convinced that, if they find that the order is erroneous, they can withdraw the order. Correct, my dear friends? So basically one point is that they can withdraw when we apply to them, or they can withdraw suo motu also. Clear, my dear friends? Speak out. Wonderful. Chalo. Finally, the last question in this mock test paper, my dear friends. With reference to drawback, come on, my dear friends, what is that language? With reference to drawback on re-export of duty paid imported goods under section 74. 74 talks about drawback in case where imported goods are exported. 74, 75, there is a small difference. 74 talks about imported goods are exported. 75 talks about imported goods are used in manufacture of finished goods, and then finished goods are exported. Wherein 74 is a case where imported goods, exported goods both are same. 75 both are different. First point, what is the time limit for re-exportation of goods as such? You have to definitely re-export within 2 years, my dear friends. Within 2 years from date of payment of duty. Within 2 years from date of payment of duty, you have to export, my dear friends. Clear, my dear friends? Speak out. And the set period of 2 years may be extended by CBIC also. That means generally the time limit for re-export is 2 years. But 2 years may be extended by somebody called CBIC, and CBIC stands for what, my dear friends? Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. That means in general it must be exported within 2 years, but CBIC may extend the period beyond 2 years also. Clear, my dear friends? Speak out. Next line, what is the rate of duty drawback if the goods are exported without use? If you export without use, my dear friends, duty drawback is straight away 98% of the duty whatever you paid. 98% of the duty whatever you are paid. Clear, my dear friends? Then, is duty drawback allowed on re-export of wearing apparel without use? Definitely answer is yes. And of course the answer is 98%. Why especially we are discussing? Because let me tell you one interesting language, my dear friends. That is, there is something called wearing apparel T-chest. Wearing apparel T-chest, exposed cinematographic films, unexposed photographic films, or exposed cinematographic films, or paper and plates. In these cases, they clearly told that if they are exported after use, credit is not allowed. So if a wearing apparel is exported after use, credit is not allowed. But if exported without use, I mean to say, if wearing apparel is exported after use, then duty drawback is not allowed. However, if wearing apparel is exported without use, then duty drawback is allowed, and that duty drawback will be 98%, my dear friends. Clear, sir? That's it. That is the end of story for this wonderful question, and that is the end of story for this mock test paper of October 2019. A very interesting paper. That's it. We'll stop there and I'll come back again with another mock test paper. Done.
If you like this video, share it with your friends. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch more such videos and learn from our expert faculty members. Press the bell icon to get regular notifications whenever we upload a new video. Download NDI mobile app to get complete CA course online. We value your support. Thank you for watching.